Hello, this is Alicia Walton, and today I'm going to be talking with you about rhetoric and the rhetorical triangle or rhetorical tools. Each of these concepts has a direct impact on the assignments that you're going to be working on throughout the semester, but specifically on the text and action assignment and the researched argument assignments. So let's start out with rhetoric. Defining rhetoric is not an easy task, and that's really the first thing that you need to do here. So as you've been looking at the screen, let's talk about what is rhetoric. Defining rhetoric itself is a bit of a difficult task. For example, I spent time in a graduate level course, and the goal in the course was to spend the entire semester defining rhetoric. I clearly do not expect you to do that in our course, but I did want to let you know that if you're having difficulty with the concept of rhetoric, you are not alone. Many people do. Experts in the field of rhetoric have difficulty wrapping their minds around what rhetoric is. In short, these 3 points will help you get a grasp of what rhetoric is. The first point is rhetoric is the study and practice of how we shape knowledge, which is complicated by the multiple ways we can interpret a text. The second point, or as I should say, second definition for rhetoric, is rhetoric can be used to study the purposes of a text. So rhetoric itself, not only is it a study and practice, but it's also a tool that you can use to analyze a text. Why is this piece geared towards me? Am I the audience? Those sorts of questions are using the purpose of it is to use rhetoric to answer those questions. So moving on, the third definition is that rhetoric can be viewed as a performance art whereby writers persuade readers to take action. And one form of this is if you look at first rhetoric as a study and practice, then rhetoric as a tool. This is looking at rhetoric as an actual art form. Rhetoric as an art form is most commonly used in politics, for instance. It's the art of using words to persuade your audience. And in short, truly, rhetoric is the art of using words or any kind of communication to persuade your audience. Using rhetoric or not using rhetoric to your benefit, either way, can change a message. So keep these things in mind, and also be aware that rhetorical situation is its own concept. So there's rhetoric. We've talked about definitions of rhetoric. And again, the most simple definition of rhetoric is using words to communicate or persuade your audience. Communicate with or persuade your audience, excuse me. And you can even go further than that and say that rhetoric is beyond words. So other types of communication can be, such as your physical communication, can also be considered part of a type of rhetoric. But for our purpose, we're just going to focus on the use of words. Rhetorical analysis is the use of ethos, pathos, and logos within a message to persuade your audience. And although this triangle right here isn't inclusive of all the ways that we can use ethos, pathos, and logos, it truly does capture ethos, pathos, and logos at its core. Logos is considered logic, and it's typically used within the message itself, And when I connect logos to logic, what I mean by that is it's the use of statistics, quotes, etc. to prove your point or persuade your audience. Ethos. Think of ethos as ethics. Ethos is the ethical appeal typically found within the voice of the person sending the message. So an example would be if you are creating a message that's intended to persuade your audience to make sure that they have healthy hearts because it's Heart Health Awareness Month, you would most likely decide to have a doctor speak as part of a presentation that you might be giving about this. Why would you have a doctor speak? And specifically, you might want to have a heart specialist speak. You'd ask this heart specialist to speak because he is your most specific professional expert in the field. If you're putting out a message about heart health and you want me to listen, I'm going to listen a lot more closely if you have a cardiologist speaking to me as part of your presentation than I would if you had a dentist speaking to me. Why? Because dentists specifically work with teeth, cardiologists work with hearts. And I do have to say I would be more likely to listen to even a dentist speak than I might be listening to I don't know, a professional sports player like Dennis Rodman. I'm not going to listen to what Dennis Rodman has to say about my heart health unless somehow he's become a heart specialist. So moving on, let's look at pathos. Pathos, if you look at the bottom right-hand corner here of the triangle, resides mostly in audience themselves. Pathos, think of pathetic or emotional appeal. And think of the term pathetic not so much in its negative connotation, but that it applies to emotions. So an emotional appeal, and by this connection to audience, the specific here is that the emotional appeal lies within the audience themselves. You apply to the emotional appeal within them, I should say. So if we want to have an emotional appeal for our audience, we want to get them excited, happy, or afraid. And these emotions, as we're all well aware, can motivate you to do things. So for instance, it's Heart Health Month again, and you do not have Dennis Rodman speaking to me because I'm not going to listen to him, right? But you have a cardiologist speaking, and he gives me some statistics, which would be logos or logic. And then he tells me a story about how his mother-in-law died from cardiac arrest and how she could have prevented it. And if he, for instance, becomes emotional in his appeal himself while appealing to you emotionally, that's use of pathos. Pathos is when anyone is appealed to via their emotions. And that's just what I would call quick and dirty version of rhetorical analysis so that you can have a basic understanding. Again, don't be afraid to go back and look these things up or ask questions if you need to. We're here